It's not hard to treat trauma, but a lot of people don't want to. So the other thing is that a lot of therapists will say, like, straight up, if you've been through certain experiences, I'm working with high functioning clients. So I like high achieving anxious people, basically, because that's the easiest people to work with, easiest people to pay you. So I was like, all right, that's not really okay. And I met a woman whose brother, her name is Trina Be Real. She's a
Oh,
comedian.
I know her.
Small world, small
Yeah.
city. Trina Be Real. She's a comedian. She's an actress. And her brother actually passed away waiting on Social Security income because he had suffered an accident. And, you know, when you have a mental illness or physical illness, that's supplemental income. But it can take years to get approved for that. So it's like, okay, something has to fill in this gap. And that's kind of where we started talking, Trina and I, and we co-founded the Floyd Foundation because it stands for Forever Living Out Your Dreams. Because the idea is that like
Nice.
people deserve to thrive even if they can't afford therapy services, even if they can't quit their job as soon as they have a breakdown, there still deserves to be something to support folks, particularly black people who kind of are born into trauma.
That's dope. Can you explain? What I heard was that treating trauma, or I guess, is that the right terminology?
Sure, yeah.
Is like one of the hardest things, and a lot of people don't want to do that. Can we know why
Yeah,
it is the hardest thing?
let's. I
Or
mean, it's hard if you want to talk it out. Like I think a lot of people think about therapy and they think about talking, so they want to come somewhere, and this is why a lot of black people don't like therapy because they be like,
I don't believe in all therapy, but
you
go
know,
ahead. Yeah, yeah.
neither does my dad. We'll talk about it later. Anyway, there's a feeling of like I can talk to my friends. I don't need to share my business. This isn't going to be helpful. I can talk to people who I know, right? I can talk to people who share my values. I can talk to people who I actually trust, or I could just tell myself, tell God, whatever it might be. Trauma is stored in your body. So it doesn't work like that. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to talk about it and be over it. In fact, some people go to therapy and they're traumatized by the therapy because they keep going in talking about this horrible thing that happened. And essentially now they nervous to wait for the therapy session because they think they're going to talk about the worst thing that ever happened. I don't do therapy like that. I start by making sure people have enough resources that they're never going to leave totally dysregulated and sort of out of their body, which is a big promise because that means I might be there for a while with you. But the other thing is that because trauma lives in your body, sometimes you don't understand it. Like I was born with a twin and the twin died. And so I screamed for months and months and months, years and years and years. They did testing on me, and the doctor was like, oh, she just misses her brother. So that was the diagnosis. We moved on. And because my family's black, that was the end of what I ever heard about it. And I blame my mom when I went to therapy for being anxious. I'd be like, she's so all over the place. She did this. I'm just, talking about my mom, talking about my ex in therapy, just thinking it's their fault that I am so on edge all the time. When in reality, when I started doing body based stuff, I relived a memory, which is possible from your body up, of me being born. And I realized, oh, snap, I've been nervous since then, right? Like since my mom was in a hospital room, depressed with nobody around, that experience for me set my nervous system up because when we're babies, we can't regulate ourselves. And I think a lot of black folks have to remember our parents are regulating us. And so if they're traumatized, we're already regulating to whatever they're at. So if our mom is depressed, we're regulating to a depressed mother. If our dad is anxious because he's working all the time and he's moving all the time, we're trying to get the care from an anxious father. And it's not a mistake that you regulate like that. We need our parents. It's not a bad habit, right? But because my mom got really depressed after I was born, when I cried, it wasn't the same as when people have a mother who's really attentive and kind of in tune with their kid would be. And I also lost somebody at my birth, which means that I'm coming in like, where's everybody going? Like, it's like, what's happening? Where is everybody? And I've always been really easy to cry. And in my family, I got made fun of for that. So until I did an EMDR training, which is what I do, EMDR. And that stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's getting more popular because it works and it works fast. And I was sitting in a training.
I was just trying it.
Just real quick. Yeah, it's like when you dream, your eyes go back and forth like this. It's the same. It's actually the same thing.
Like the rapid eye.
Yeah, the rapid eye
Movement.
movements. Yeah. And so what ended up happening for me is I thought I was processing something about a date. And then the next day I'm thinking about my mom. And then the next day I'm randomly going through this memory of something and I'm like, this has nothing to do with my mom. Like my mom actually I think did the best she could. And that still doesn't mean that I had this perfect experience, right? And I think that's where the work that I do becomes really important. One, because we need to forgive our families a lot of time. I think especially in the Black community, we have to forgive our family because a lot of people, I mean a lot of my clients especially, they're hurt by their family. Like straight up, not emotionally, like literally, financially, physically hurt by their family. And that's coming from a place of their parents being hurt by their family and abandoned by their family. And it's like, can we have enough empathy to say coping doesn't always look pretty, but you're coping? And so some of this really starts to be about when do you notice your survival responses going off? Because some of those are inherited, some of those are learned, right? But you're automatically going to do that from your body up. Talking is not going to get you to a place where you can get around survival instincts. That's not smart, right? And so when it comes to trauma, they say we recognize a threat faster than we recognize a face. That's how quickly we notice if something is off. And so it's not about thinking. It's like this unconscious programming that's supposed to be faster than that. And that's where I think it can be hard to work with people when you're used to being really smart and talking people out of something that's an idea. This happens a lot in relationships. You're like intellectually doing the thing, right? And you're just getting upset instead of kind of like letting the kind of energy in the room guide where we go next. It's a very like intellectual activity, and I think therapy doesn't have to be that much of an intellectual chore, but it is for a lot of people. They want to analyze.
I have a question about, and this is about your work with the Floyd Foundation. As healthcare is steadily progressing and laws are constantly changing, do you feel that one, because mental illness, I don't think it's more prevalent. I think that it's more visible these
Sure.
days. Do you think that accessibility is going to change? Such that, because now, like, let's say I see a therapist. I've seen a therapist previously that took insurance. I've seen one that doesn't take insurance. I'm with one now that take, so if you want a good therapist and someone you're comfortable with,
Yeah.
they may end up out of your network, and now you got to pay because you already got a year and a half in with them, and you can't go start over. So, and just because we're seeing people freak out and commit suicide and like they burn out at their jobs and they tripping out on people and stuff. Now that it's more commonly seen. I want to impress that. Do you think that that's going to change just as based on what you know from your practice?
I mean, I think there's two conversations. One is hopeful, and the other is a little like, oh, I don't know where this is going to go from here. One is everybody want to be an entrepreneur right now, So there's a lot of Black therapists working for themselves who used to work for big agencies. That's a great thing, right? Because we want Black therapists. On the other hand, that also means they're probably not
So, yeah.
taking the same insurance, doing the same things that they used to do. And so it becomes like a access thing. How can I make the same amount of money on my job without taking insurance? And that's sort of the pull and tug that I've been seeing. But I think in general, as people are talking about mental health, even if it's not therapy per se, like wellness resources are expanding like crazy. Retreats and, meditation and yoga, like everything
Right.
for everybody is expanding. And I think that's good because honestly, it doesn't have to be therapy, but access to healing in any sort of way is good. And body-based healing is really just robbed from a lot of Eastern practices anyway. So it's not like
Okay.
we just started doing it over here, but like it's been done in a lot of places for years. African sort of based spirituality is really akin to the work that I do. It's not like some brand new wave.
Right.
I guess the good thing is that I have been seeing more people get therapy, so for whatever access issues there might be, I'm seeing more people who want it. Everyone I know who works with people who have trauma, they are completely booked up. So
You know what's crazy to me? Like, it's just weird. Like, this is my thing. I think that it's definitely necessary for some, 100%. It's like, but if nobody really knows because nobody was here, but were people as damaged as they are today 200 years ago? And I would argue that they weren't. And I would argue that the need for therapy 200 years ago probably wasn't as big as the need for therapy today. And then that goes.
For which set of people?
I was gonna say 200 years.
Well,
That's a specific.
I'm speaking.
In my head, I'm thinking 200 years.
I'm speaking.
You know what we was at?
I'm not. Well, I'm not. All right. I'm not speaking in terms of like slavery. I'm just speaking in terms of general totality. Like, like, or even 100 years ago, or even 75 years ago. Like, yeah, I think obviously the black history, especially in America, there's probably a lot of therapy that probably needs to be done, just because of the roots of it. But now I'm taking color out. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just talking about all in all. And that's where, like, I'm trying to figure out, like, at what point was it a thing where we all kind of realized, but we all need therapy. You know what I'm saying? Because it's becoming a point where I feel like, are we really just not being real with reality? And we're fighting it? Is this something that we're not being or having the real friendships and genuine or maybe good family members that we don't have to confide in? You know what I'm saying? I'm curious to, which I don't know, but I'm curious to figure out what are the determining factors that are really the pushing for therapy, not excluding traumatic events.
That's interesting. I mean, we can't totally exclude traumatic events.
Well,
it feels a little.
I feel like no. I mean,
extreme.
When I say excluding, no. When I say excluding, when I say excluding it, I'm really speaking upon, like, somebody who, like yourself, had a traumatic event at birth.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to identify until later on. Or somebody who might have had a traumatic event at 16, or whatever the case may be. Those, obviously, I do think. Probably not everybody, but a lot of people will need help to probably overcome that obstacle in their life. But yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say, is like, life has been life. I think there's certain things that's changed. I really, in my personal opinion, I feel like therapy has become more so a necessity now than ever, because people are failing at a higher rate and promise too many dreams. And because of that, it's causing depression. We talked about one side about being an entrepreneur, right? And in terms of the therapy world, but now there's also everybody wanting to be an entrepreneur on the everyday life world, which, Alan did send me something that stated somebody had dropped a stat. I don't know the source, but it was the average entrepreneur makes $28,000 a year. If you're not a successful one and, moving your money around and, for tax reasons and whatnot, and you're actually making $28,000 a year, especially in New Jersey, you can't survive. So, and that could be a traumatic, event for however long that is. And then then we pose the question, well, why are you wanting to be an entrepreneur? And it's because somebody told us that you can be anything you want. And it's like, well, that's not always the case. And I think that, it's just, I don't want to ramble about it, but there's so many factors and variables that go into therapy, which is why I am like, yes, I believe that therapy is needed. But I believe there's something weird going on where everybody is saying that they need therapy. Yeah. Even if it ain't broke, they're trying to fix it. You know what I mean?
And I mean, it's interesting because you do hear people say, like, everybody should go to therapy. Even if you don't think you need it, you should still go. And I mean, I'm not that therapist. I'll sit down with people and be like, but what do you want to do? Like, why are you here, though? Like, I'll get very kind of...
I'm going to take that payment, but I need you to tell me, what do you really want?
But, in all fairness, because I started out doing mandated work.
Okay.
I started out doing work in the prison system, doing therapy.
Wow.
And so if you could imagine people who don't like therapy, who are mandated to therapy through the prison system, they don't like therapy at first. Like, the idea of a woman coming in at a home-based therapy. I come into your house and say to you, I'm going to work with you whether you like it or not, so that you don't go to prison. You know what I mean? That's not really a choice.
Damn.
But that's America right now. And that's America in the prison system. And that's alternatives to incarceration, right? And so I'm doing family therapy, which is if that was my family, I would be terrified. Like I remember being like, I would never say this to my mother. Oh my God, you're gonna have to answer this in front of me. But the empathy of me being like, I would never do this. Like I would never do this made me do therapy in a way that none of the other people around me kind of were doing it. And I think that meant looking up a lot of creative ways to do therapy and trying to figure out if that actually worked. And it turns out creative therapy interventions work better for trauma than just talking. So I would end up doing raps with people. I would end up
Like rap,
like raps. Yeah.
what's your favorite rap?
Like Issa Rae.
I would
Like those kind of raps.
Like it depends. There was a client that I work with who said he likes sad raps, like sad, like emotional raps. And I said, like what? He's like Tupac. And I said, okay. And so, but the one thing is that I rapped. So it wasn't like I was like, do this for me, like perform. I was like, oh yeah, I've written raps too. Let me do something, you know what I mean? And then I do something and then he do a little something. And what ends up happening in writing very naturally for a lot of folks of color is we write about what we experience. And so whether or not I was your therapist, it's not about that. It's about the fact that we now have a relationship with one another. And in that, I know more than you do about mental health because I studied it. You know what I mean? Not because I know you. You're the expert on you. You know your stuff, right? But if you can find somebody to work with who's humble enough to say, I can work with you to say, I know about this stuff. You know about you. You tell me about you. I'll help you learn about how to do this stuff, period. Right? Nobody's going to say, I don't need that. You know what I mean? It's like you getting arrested, bro. You need it. You know what I mean? Your mother is mad at you. You need it. Your girlfriend is banging at the window right now during our sessions. You need it.
Can I ask a question? I want to swing it, but I'm gonna stay on topic at the same time.
We're gonna
with your profession, right?
What are you gonna ask?
Do you feel? Hold on. Do you feel? Do you feel that women who are basing their whole senses on monetary finances for a relationship should potentially seek therapy?
I think all women seeking a relationship should probably seek therapy. Because
don't beat around the bush here.
The dating apps are doing something to us.
I agree.
Like let's be honest. If I think about people meeting people, do I think people have a problem meeting people? No, not really. But for some reason, when it comes to meeting someone to date, we are red flag seeking, and
Well, I don't seek red flags.
Yeah, you do.
What red flags do I?
We had a whole segment on it. Remember?
I said I don't ignore them, but I don't look for them.
Everything was like red flag, red flag, red flag.
Well, let's clarify this. We're gonna
about you.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong.
We have tape. I just said don't ignore the red flags, but yeah.
Sure. I mean,
I do think that people are programmed to look for red flags.
Well, let's talk about how trauma really works in real time. Let's talk about dating and trauma. Let's just mash those two things together into 2023, right? I have, for example, been through an experience. This is how trauma works, and it was overwhelming. Something about it just was like, whew, I didn't know how to cope with that, and I didn't see it coming. You're going to get me one time. That's the way trauma works. You're going to get me that one time, and you're not going to get me again. So I'm going to figure out something, whether it's by being, more presentable, like I'm going to be pleasing to everybody, and that's how I'm going to get more of what I want, or if I'm going to, listen to a podcast about having, what have I heard it called, a starting lineup of 5 men that I date so that not one of them can hurt me. Putting money before people is a really good way to protect yourself from the natural consequences of knowing people, right? Like, you don't know what they're going to do. It's certain uncertainty. And if we can't sort of get to a place of like, I just have to sit with what I don't know, right? We really aren't good at dating. It sort of becomes a game of trying to predict and sort of get the other person in some sort of scorekeeping thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're really going, what did you do for me so I can do this for you? If we're even keeping that score, we're already in a bad place. Mm-hmm. That scorekeeping is a signal that you're already not getting something met. And so you're like, let me make sure I let him know every little thing that I did for him so he knows all the things he should do for me. And a lot of people, if I'm honest, a lot of women get really worried that they don't know the right way to be right now. They don't know whether the right way to be is to be hard and have a lot of really strict boundaries, or to be really compassionate and be really open and give people a chance. It's like people just want to be loved. But because they don't feel loved, they just want to feel in control. And that's a very human thing. The reality is that I think people think everything needs to be good right out of the gate. But if you think about your friendships, right, you didn't start out by going, what don't I like about them? You start out by saying, what do I like?
Yeah.
What's making me excited about this person? What makes me want to see them again? If you date like that, I call it just mindful dating. Date if you excited to date them. And if you're not excited, don't go on a date. Like, period. And if you're feeling like, ugh, I'm going on this dating app, we already not in a good place body-wise to feel open to good stuff. And if that's the truth, you want to put down the trophy?
You see, I really like her. You know why I like her? Because she actually gave me the option. Okay, because you were always gonna demand me. You can put. Do you want to put down? I love that. Yeah, I'll put it down.
I was gonna
You wanna
say,
put it down right there or right here.
it's up to you. Now I feel like I got to give
Child.
you choices. I want to give you choices so you feel empowered out here in these streets.
I just want to feel heard.
You just
Just want to feel heard.
That's what she said. You know what I'm saying?
That's where I got it from.
Yeah, the money thing is tough because it's like tale as old as time. We were saying that before the show. That's not the new narrative. Unfortunately, that's the old narrative. The old narrative is like men really see you as their property. So like you better choose a man who at least can provide a life for you that doesn't make you feel bad being his property. And I do think there's some industries and there's some places where that is still kind of the feeling.
Yeah, and I also think that. Well, let's not. I don't want to.
I know what he's gonna say. Can you unpack it a little bit?
Well, okay. So, I mean, I think, you think of old school marriage, we're talking about like dowries, right? Mm-hmm. Most people, when we talk about dowries, I guess don't really consider that the woman is part of a dowry. Like you're giving, like in India right now, you get a washer, a dryer, and a wife, right? Like they're all together in a thing. And when we monetize marriage like that, it's mostly a contractual agreement. This idea that it's romantic is actually relatively new. Right. And everybody kind of knows that, but then social media blows it up and it starts to be sort of a racist conversation, right? Because everybody was watching Real Housewives and chilling. Nobody cares that these women literally have no job. I was just watching an episode of 8 at the Table. You said A Life of Leisure.
Right.
Nobody cares that they have a life of leisure because we've seen it so much. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there was a term used on here called women who have a life of leisure that we're used to seeing, right? Like we've seen those women and we know what they look like. And in our 90s movies, there were everybody's pretty wife on like, what was that movie with Mary-Kate and Ashley? It was like the wife, for the dad. She'd just be around. She don't have a job. She just has a dog. Like, we're fine with that. And it's okay with us that that's who people marry who have money. But then in the Black community, we come from more of a scarcity of stuff. And so there's a conversation about everybody getting money. We all want money. So then to say, hey, women in this culture are hoes when they do this. You know what I mean? Women in this culture are messing up by prioritizing it. It's like they're doing what everyone else is doing. And this is really what happens with Black people in general. We do what white people do. And then people are like, well, why would you do that? Why would you think that's okay? Where'd you get that idea from? And it's like even the audacity to think working hard gets you money. Right. And then your parents got to tell you, no, you got to work twice as hard as that person to make the same amount of money. Right. That's the sort of thing where it's like we're growing up in the same world. So if on some level you think this is what I'm worth, why am I thinking I'm worth something different than what you think I'm worth? If I'm seeing that people are throwing money at women from the time I'm little and I'm like, I ain't got no money, but I see they've been throwing money at these girls over here and I know what those girls over there look like. That's a really easy mental shortcut as far as I'm concerned. It's like, what are you worth? At the very least, your body is worth money.